I'm the HOA president. This property is a blight on our community." That's what Tamara Ellison shrieked as she slammed her luxury SUV into park. Tires skidding, engine still growling like it was offended to be on a ranch. She stomped onto our gravel drive like she was conquering a third-world dictatorship, heels stabbing holes in Texas dirt, lips curled into a smile so tight it could split granite. She'd pointed straight at my truck like it had personally insulted her ancestors. Meanwhile, Grandpa Clyde, leaning back in a creaky porch chair with his ancient thermos, sipped his coffee and whispered, "She parks in the same spot every time." Calm as a man watching squirrels argue, and somehow I knew he wasn't just making a comment. He was building a blueprint. What Tamara didn't realize, yet, was that she had just picked a turf war with the last family on Earth dumb enough to stay peaceful and smart enough to hold a grudge, with plumbing-grade precision. Leave a comment and tell us where you're tuning in from. If stories like this, full of sweet justice, wild twists, and just the right amount of HOA drama make your day, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story, it's even messier, louder, and legally spicier than this one. You're not ready, but you should be. She'd been circling us like a buzzard in a pantsuit for months, and not because we did anything wrong, unless feeding chickens and owning a rusty work truck now counted as moral crimes. Her HOA kingdom, Hickory Ridge Estates, lay across the road in a grid of identical beige nightmares. Meanwhile, our family ranch had been here before asphalt had a zip code, but Tamara decided our barn, our birds, and my truck offended her suburban aesthetic, and she made it her mission to enforce stand, as she put it. I was halfway done loading my landscaping tools when she rolled up like a parade float, flanked by Greg Knopf, her weasel with a camera. He jumped out, recording like this was episode 1 of Cops Rural Edition. I barely had time to grab my coffee before she launched into a speech about visual violations, community cohesion, and upholding value. I didn't interrupt. Some people hang themselves just fine with their own rope. The truck she hated was a 2003 Dodge Ram with a tailgate that squealed like it had trauma, but it hauled mulch like a dream and still had the same duct-taped radio I installed after prom. I'd parked it right by the mailbox, a good 20 feet from the road, while I ran in to grab that forgotten caffeine. A harmless thing, unless you're Tamara Ellison and you've decided that work trucks are the visual equivalent of vandalism. "This monstrosity," she spat, "is dragging down the entire block's worth." Greg panned the camera around like he was documenting a crime scene. That's when Grandpa stood up. Flannel shirt, blue jeans from another decade, and boots so worn they'd qualify as antiques. He took one look at her SUV, glossy, white, spotless, overcompensating, and said, "Nice paint job." "Shame if it got baptized by the wrong system." She narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" Grandpa just shrugged. "Observation. Some cars attract birds, others attract plumbing issues. Nature's funny like that." I tried to stay calm, but something about her tone made my molars itch. "We're not in your HOA," I reminded her. Again, this is family land, always has been. But Tamara didn't care. "I'm protecting community standards," she barked, "and this property is a threat to everything we've built." Greg nodded like a bobblehead with a quota. Then Tamara, God bless her confidence, actually touched my truck, hand on the hood like she was issuing a condemnation. "This eyesore, that filthy chicken coop, the smell, it all needs to be gone." She whipped around and gestured grandly. "This SUV represents cleanliness, precision, pride. What you've got here is chaos." Grandpa leaned on the porch rail and gave her a look I can only describe as biblical. "Lot of pride in that vehicle," he said. "Would be real unfortunate if the ground underneath it shifted." She stormed back to her car, heels hammering each step. "You have 24 hours to clean up this dump or face the consequences." As she screeched away in a cloud of gravel, Grandpa turned to me and said, "Still parks right over the old junction. Hasn't missed it once." I frowned. "What junction?" He smiled, slow and wide, like a mechanic remembering a machine's secret button. "Septic line from '64. Installed it myself. Still functions. Just needs the right valve. That's when I realized he wasn't talking in metaphors anymore. He went inside and came back out 5 minutes later with a dusty blueprint roll and a twinkle in his eye. "Son," he said, spreading it out on the porch table, "the problem with bullies is they don't think physics applies to them. But pressure always builds, and sooner or later, it's got to go somewhere." I looked down at that plan, then up at him, and right there, in the same chair where he once taught me how to whistle with a blade of grass, Grandpa Clyde started planning the single most poetic plumbing incident this side of the Mississippi. The next morning, there it was, slapped right on our gate like a dead fish nailed to the door, a $500 0-cents fine for violation of visual standards. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Visual standards? That wasn't even a real category, not for us anyway. We weren't part of Hickory Ridge Estates. Never signed a thing, never paid dues, never agreed to let a committee of sun hat tyrants judge the color of our mulch. But Tamara Ellison didn't need facts. She had clipboards, a camera guy, and a voice like a rusty whistle jammed in a lawnmower. I stood there with that paper in my hand, wondering if she'd actually convinced herself we were under her thumb, or if she just liked the sound of her own power that much. Either way, something told me she wasn't finished. And I wasn't wrong. By Thursday, Tamara was back. Same navigator, same smug smile, but this time with reinforcements. Greg hopped out first, phone already filming like he was capturing the moon landing. Then came 2 HOA board members, one shaped like a beanbag, the other shaped like regret. Tamara stayed seated, barking from her window like a drive-through dictator. "You've ignored my warning, Mr. Dalton," she declared, flipping open some binder full of self-importance. "This just the beginning." I noticed the new additions had matching polos and clipboards. "Independent inspectors," she called them, hired to assess potential environmental hazards. Now, I may run a landscaping business, but I'm not blind. These guys looked less like city health agents and more like the kind of cousins you avoid at reunions. And the cherry on top, they all climbed out of her SUV. That's right. Tamara brought her own fake inspectors in the same vehicle she threatened us with last week. It was like watching a magician pull the rabbit, the hat, and the audience from the same pocket. And I had a front row seat. I didn't say much, just smiled and hit record on my phone as they trudged onto the property like they'd been deputized at a gas station. The tallest one stepped forward, clearing his throat like a nervous usher. "Mr. Dalton, we're here to investigate serious health concerns related to your, agricultural situation." I raised an eyebrow. "Which department are you with?" He blinked. "We're, contractors. Hired by the city." Behind him, Tamara was smirking like a cat in a birdhouse. The shortest guy scribbled furiously on his clipboard without even looking around. "Severe chicken waste contamination," he muttered. Then he paused and turned to Tamara. "What was it again?" She didn't miss a beat. Dangerous levels of everything. He nodded, kept writing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were winging it. And she thought no one would catch it. But the best part? I caught it all. On camera. Every lie, every glance, every whispered prompt. And just like that, the HOA president had cooked up her own scandal, with me holding the receipts. As the inspectors wandered aimlessly, one of them pointed at our vegetable garden. Lush, neat. USDA certified, I might add, and called it an unauthorized zone. He stammered something about city code violations and potential risks to the watershed. Then he looked at Tamara again for backup. Mrs. Ellison said, he started but realized his mistake halfway through. I zoomed in with my phone just in time to catch the color drain from his face. That's what happens when you follow someone so far off the legal map, you forget which laws are real. Tamara, unfazed, stepped forward like she was ready for her Oscar. You have 48 hours to fix these violations, she shouted, loud enough for the wind to carry. Or I will have this property condemned. She couldn't help herself. Even when her scheme was unraveling, she clung to control like it was glued to her French manicure. As they climbed back into her Navigator, the irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. Fake inspectors, bogus reports, all chauffeured around by the very woman filing the complaints. It was like the sheriff showing up to the crime scene in the getaway car. And yes, I got it all. That evening, word spread fast. Tamara had called an emergency HOA meeting for the next day, claiming she had proof of community threats. I knew what that meant. She was going to twist the footage, spin the story, and turn my family into the villains. But I had other plans. Grandpa Clyde was in the barn, blueprints spread out like he was plotting a moon mission. "Still lines up," he muttered, tapping the old septic diagram. That line runs straight under the barn wall and out past the slope where she always parks. He traced the line with a wrench, like a general drawing up troop movements. "System's old but solid. Pressure's key. We can reverse it with the right pump." I watched him work, feeling the tension melt into something else. Anticipation, maybe. Because Tamara Ellison thought she was winning. But she didn't know about Clyde. And she sure didn't know about 60 years of gravity-fed karma hiding under her favorite parking spot. Sunday morning, 9 a.m., just like clockwork. Friday morning, she showed up unannounced, holding a manila folder like it contained the word of God. 200,000, Tamara said, stepping out of her gleaming SUV like she was blessing us with her presence. Cash, closing in 10 days. She said it like it was a favor, like my family's land passed down through generations, hand-built with calluses and soul, was a clearance item on her developer checklist. I didn't even answer at first. I just stared at the number, doing the math. Our acreage, water access, proximity to the highway, we were looking at low-end $2 million, minimum. But Tamara wasn't making an offer. She was dangling a bribe with the same smile you'd expect from someone selling swampland in Arizona. "Your water situation won't get any better," she added with a wink. That's when I knew. She didn't just bring the drought, she engineered it. I walked out to the well house in silence, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe a busted pump, maybe a pipe freeze, though it hadn't dipped below 50 in weeks. But no, the motor hummed like a songbird. Everything was in working order. There just wasn't any water. Then I saw it. An official-looking notice duct-taped to the side of the pump house door. Water access suspended pending investigation of contamination claims. Claim, no seal, no contact number, no name. Just a scrawl that could have been signed by a drunken octopus. My stomach dropped. My landscaping business relied on that well. No water meant no mixing concrete, no irrigation, no power washing. I had 5 jobs lined up for the week. By noon, I'd canceled 3 and lost 2 of them to competitors. Tamara had hit the artery and she knew it, and I, like a fool, had let her. I was still shaking when I sent that email. Full rage, zero filter, 1 a.m., no sleep, hands jittering from caffeine and fury. I wrote to every board member on record. "I know what you're doing," I typed. "I have documents, timelines, permits. Every shady move you've made. This land isn't going anywhere, and if you keep pushing, I'll push back. Harder." I hit send before my better judgment could blink. The next morning, I woke up to regret sitting beside me like a hangover in a bathrobe. I knew I'd just given her ammunition, and I didn't have to wait long to see it fired. By that afternoon, Tamara had printed my email, bolded every word in red ink, and stapled a copy to every porch in Hickory Ridge. "Unhinged landowner threatens your HOA board," her flyer read. She'd added her own commentary in italics, possibly dangerous, unstable legal action pending. It was gossip disguised as public service. And some folks were buying it. That's when Sophie Ortega stepped in. Sophie lived 3 lots down from Tamara and had the misfortune of sharing a block with her gossip network. But she also had a cousin in the city water department. "I did some digging," she whispered, catching up with me in the grocery store parking lot. "Tamara paid a mid-level contractor to flag your well as a contamination risk. Used HOA funds, masked it as a consulting expense. I've got the email." She handed me a USB drive like it was classified intel. Inside were months of digital breadcrumbs, payments, emails, suggested language for violation letters. One thread even had the subject line, "Final Pressure." It made my blood run cold. Tamara hadn't just harassed us. She planned it, budgeted it, timed it like a recipe. But the thing about pressure is it builds, and Clyde had been watching that build like a man, watching the gauge on a boiler with a twitchy relief valve. Back at the barn, Grandpa was crouched beside the old septic schematic, flashlight in one hand, wrench in the other. "Still connected?" he muttered. "Lines are solid, no cracks, just needs a backflow valve and the right pump pressure." He tapped the map with the satisfaction of someone seeing his enemy walk into a trap they didn't know existed. "She parks in the same spot every time," he added, as if that detail held the key to the whole universe. Same spot, right over the outlet junction. Predictable people make plumbing simple. I laughed, despite the stress. "Grandpa," I said, "are you seriously planning to declare war with a 60-year-old septic system?" He didn't look up, just grinned. "Boy, when someone's been flinging crap at you for weeks, sometimes it's polite to return the favor." Professionally, of course. And when he flipped the breaker on the old test pump and watched it hum to life, he nodded like a general approving a launch. Still flows backwards, real smooth. And suddenly, Sunday morning had a whole new meaning. If this story hit home or made you laugh, grit your teeth, or rethink your HOA, do someone a favor and send it to a friend who's dealing with their own version of a Tamara. You never know who needs a reminder that justice sometimes flows under pressure. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought of this story. I read everyone. Saturday morning, I hammered a bright red "For Sale by Owner" sign into the front pasture. Big letters, real visible, just crooked enough to make it look like I'd given up. Clyde stood beside me holding a cup of black coffee like it was a ceremonial prop, barely hiding the smirk playing on his face. "She'll be here in under 30 minutes, he said. "That sign's like blood in the water," and right on cue, Tamara's navigator came barreling down the gravel road like she'd been waiting in a bush with binoculars. Tires skidded, doors flew open, and there she was, marching toward us with Greg in tow and a new player in the game, a pudgy man in a wrinkled suit she introduced as Mr. Blackstone, my investment partner. His real name was Jerry, her cousin. He had the nervous energy of a man who'd just realized he was about to witness something illegal and didn't want to be in the splash zone. Tamara wasted no time. "I want to see everything," she barked. "Every room, every outbuilding, every inch. Mr. Blackstone needs to assess demolition costs." She said it with a kind of hunger that would have made a vulture look humble. As we walked, she sneered at the barn, the coop, even the chickens. "All of it goes," she said. "We're paving over this dump. Sunny Ridge Phase 2 will be luxury." Greg filmed every insult, every condescending flick of her hand. But my focus wasn't on her words, it was on Clyde. He moved casually, fiddling with the wiring in the barn, checking his pressure gauge like a man tuning an orchestra. The pump was silent, hidden behind the tractor. The hose was buried under straw and gravel, leading directly beneath the spot where Tamara always parked. "Sunday's still wash day, right?" Clyde asked, almost too casually. She waved him off like he was a fly. "Of course. My Escalade needs proper upkeep, unlike this place." He nodded, smiled, and tapped the gauge once more. Showtime was near. Inside the house, I laid out a stack of documents I'd prepared the night before. Property survey, zoning map, easement history, and right in the middle, looking perfectly boring, was the Community Standards Acknowledgement Form, a professionally typeset page that just happened to contain several juicy admissions. Improper use of HOA funds, targeting residents without cause, manipulating inspection results, and a tidy clause agreeing that any such violations were actionable offenses. In short, a confession, but dressed up like HOA paperwork. Tamara didn't even glance at it. She flipped, she skimmed, she scoffed. "I don't have time to read every page," she said. "I'm the HOA president, I know what I'm doing." She signed with a flourish, handed it back like it was a receipt at the spa, and said, "Now sign mine." But I didn't. I looked her in the eye and said, "Actually, I've had a change of heart." She blinked. "Excuse me," I held my ground. "I'm not selling, and I'm definitely not handing this land over to someone who insults my family while planning to evict our neighbors." Greg looked up from his camera, sensing something was shifting. Tamara's smile cracked. "You tricked me," she snapped. "You set this up." She lunged forward, actually grabbing my shirt. Greg kept filming. Her cousin Jerry backed away like someone had just lit a fuse. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "Tomorrow morning, I'm bringing every board member. You'll be buried in fines." And that's when Clyde stepped in, calm as a monk with a wrench. "You still planning to wash your car tomorrow?" he asked. She didn't even look at him. "Of course, 9 a.m. sharp. I believe in routine, something this dump clearly lacks." Clyde nodded, looking back at the pressure gauge with a satisfied grin. "Routine's a funny thing," he said. "Can be real predictable." After she left, storming out with Greg trailing behind and Jerry muttering apologies, I collapsed into one of the old kitchen chairs. Clyde poured himself a celebratory splash of sweet tea and unfolded the blueprint one last time. "You know," he said, tapping the route from the septic tank to the parking area, "this system was overbuilt back in the day, 40 feet of direct line. With the new valve we added, she'll be parked exactly on top of the outlet." He patted the pump. "All it needs is about 2 seconds of pressure, and nature will do the rest." I looked down at the confession she'd signed, looked out the window at the gravel pad where her SUV always sat, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled without hesitation. "Tomorrow," Clyde said, lifting his glass. "Karma comes in liquid form." And I swear the old man had never looked so young. Sunday morning showed up exactly on time. Bright sun, blue skies, and just enough humidity to make you wonder if the air had secrets. At 8:45, the first neighbors arrived, drawn in by nothing more than a casual text. "Block party at the Daltons, 9:30. Bring a lawn chair and a sense of humor." By 9, a dozen folks stood scattered in our yard, sipping coffee and eyeing the old barn like it might reveal a magic trick. Clara brought cookies. Sophie had her phone ready like a war correspondent. And Clyde? He sat on the porch rail with the patience of a sniper and a thermos labeled Liquid Justice. No one said much, but everyone knew something was coming. When Tamara's navigator turned onto the gravel drive at 9:02, people shifted forward like an orchestra hitting its first note. She pulled into her favorite spot right over the pipe and stepped out like a prom queen arriving to crown herself. Her voice sliced through the air before her heels even hit the dirt. "Attention, everyone! You're about to witness accountability in action." Behind her, Greg had his camera rolling, and the entire HOA board was strung out behind them like a line of reluctant backup dancers. "This property has violated over 17 clauses," Tamara declared, waving a folder fat with printed citations. "It's an eyesore, a nuisance, and an embarrassment to the community." She spun toward me with her signature shriek. "You could have sold peacefully, but you chose war, and today the consequences arrive." I didn't respond, just nodded slowly while Clyde reached behind the barn's false panel. His fingers hovered over the pump switch, eyes tracking her like radar. The chickens even went quiet, which, around here, is basically divine confirmation. Tamara kept going. "This dump lowers property values, the truck, the co-op, that thing you call a barn. None of it meets code, and these people," she said, gesturing to the neighbors, "they deserve better, a community with standards, people who belong." Her words stung like vinegar on a paper cut, but they also lit a fuse. People murmured, faces changed, a few arms folded. Sophie quietly hit record on her phone. Tamara took a breath to reload, and that's when Clyde flipped the switch. There was a low, building groan like the earth itself had indigestion, then a sudden rumble beneath the gravel, and then it erupted like a geyser summoned from the bowels of every HOA injustice that ever existed. 30 years of age-septic fury launched straight into the sky and came crashing back down, dead center into Tamara's open sunroof. The sound was biblical. A wet slap, a sickening splash, a squelch that made grown men flinch. Her white leather interior turned brown in seconds. Her designer blouse went two-tone. Her expression froze like a statue mid-heart attack. For 3 glorious seconds she stood still, mouth open, hands raised, until the stench hit. And then came the scream. A sound so sharp, so high-pitched, Birds flew off fences like the rapture had been called early. Greg, to his credit or stupidity, kept filming even as he staggered backward, gagging. Clyde stood with his arms folded, watching like a man admiring a well-dug trench. "Backflow system still solid," he muttered. "Good pressure. Smooth release." Tamara, now soaked, slipped in the runoff and hit the ground with the grace of a dropped ham. Her board members scattered, trying not to get caught in the blast radius. Neighbors were doubled over with laughter, some filming, some just gasping. Someone shouted, "Guess the HOA doesn't cover that," and a cheer broke out. It was like Old Faithful had been weaponized. Tamara clawed her way up, covered in karma and screaming threats, but no one moved to help her. Clyde just leaned in and said, "Might want to check your bylaws. I'm pretty sure that's classified as an act of nature." And just like that, the tide shifted. For months, she'd ruled by fear, but now she stood dripping in poetic justice, and everyone saw her for what she really was, a bully with a badge, now knee-deep in her own mess. And if you think the mess ended there, well, you're going to want to hear what happened after the fire department showed up. Let's just say her resignation didn't come with a press conference, but it did come with a disinfectant hose. Keep watching, it gets even better. If that felt satisfying, just wait. Because Tamara's meltdown was only the beginning. What happens when a viral video, a signed confession, and a septic-scented SUV collide with city officials and legal firepower? You'll want to see how deep this mess really goes. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. And if you know someone dealing with an HOA nightmare of their own, share this story. Trust me, the next part, it flushes the rest of her power straight down the drain. Tamara resigned that afternoon. No speech, no farewell email, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. She phoned it in while wrapped in a tarp in the back of a sanitation van, demanding her board carry on the mission. But the mission apparently had left the station and drowned in septic runoff. Sophie Ortega was voted in as interim HOA president within the hour. The vote wasn't close. The same people who once tiptoed around Tamara's temper now couldn't raise their hands fast enough to move on. That smell clinging to her Escalade, it wasn't just sewage, it was the scent of a power vacuum. Fresh, overdue, and exactly what the neighborhood needed. And while Tamara tried to scrub her name off every document she'd ever signed, we were already uploading the video. The one with her signature on the confession form, the one where she admitted to targeting neighbors, bribing city contractors, and gaslighting half the zip code. By Monday morning, our email evidence, confession page, and the unedited video were sitting on the desks of 3 different departments: City Ethics, Housing Commission, a very motivated county attorney. Clyde delivered them all in a manila envelope labeled "For when you're tired of her crap." That line still makes me smile. I half expected the footage to be ignored or brushed off, but I underestimated just how fast local government can move when you give them paperwork, proof, and a public meltdown that's been live-streamed 40,000 times. By Tuesday, our water was back on. By Thursday, the city issued a statement confirming Tamara's HOA had violated multiple ethics codes and improperly used public resources. And by Friday, she'd quietly moved out of state. One U-Haul, no goodbyes, and ironically, not a single neighbor waved. Turns out when you try to pave over people's lives, the only thing you actually flatten is your own reputation. As for my business, it didn't just recover, it exploded. Turns out folks like hiring the landscaper who stood up to the HOA queen and walked away with his land, his dignity, and an entire online fanbase. We had clients driving in from 2 towns over just to shake my hand, see the legendary barn, and meet the chickens. Sophie even helped me redesign my website with a new tagline: "We handle messes, even HOA-sized ones." I'll admit, I didn't see that one coming. I thought I was finished that week, broken down, run dry, and beat. But sometimes the worst pressure brings up the deepest roots, and what grows after a storm? Stronger, sturdier, more stubborn. Just like Grandpa always said, you can't build character with convenience. That night, Clyde and I sat on the porch, watching the chickens peck and argue like they were running their own HOA. He passed me a glass of iced tea, same as he did when I was 10 and thought hard work was a punishment. "Remember what I taught you about pressure?" he asked, swirling his glass. "It builds, it squeezes, but when it's directed right, it clears everything in its path." I nodded. She thought she had us, thought she controlled it all. He smiled. She forgot something important. You don't own a place just because you have a title. You own it because you show up, because you know every inch of it, because your people are buried in its dirt and your memories are tied to its fences. We sat in the quiet for a long while, long enough for the breeze to shift and the air to finally feel light again. And that's the funny part. She came in thinking we were trash, unorganized, outdated, beneath her vision of standards. But she forgot the most basic rule of land. You don't conquer what you don't understand. She ran a neighborhood on fear. We built a legacy on grit. She weaponized a pipe, and in the end, all that polished pride she used to crush others, it ended up soaked in 30 years of justice. She thought she ran the neighborhood. It turns out she just fertilized it. So there I was, a ranch kid with a busted truck, a half-drained bank account, and a chicken coop the HOA wanted condemned, somehow sitting on the porch with a cold drink, a booming business, and a front yard full of neighbors laughing instead of whispering. The same barn they tried to tear down became a community gathering spot. The same chickens they called unsanitary are now local mascots. And the same old man who used to fix leaks with coat hangers and chewing gum, he reminded everyone that wisdom doesn't need a title. It just needs time and a little pressure. See, this story wasn't about plumbing. It was about people, about knowing when to fight and, more importantly, knowing what's worth fighting for. My grandpa didn't build this ranch with committees or rules. He built it with conviction, consistency, and a deep belief that land, real land, is more than soil. It's memory, it's family, it's freedom. Tamara thought power was something you scream, but real power? It's quiet, it's patient, and sometimes it's hidden underground, waiting for the right moment to rise up and make a point nobody forgets. If there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this: you don't need a title to stand your ground. Whether it's your home, your reputation, or your peace, protect it, because bullies bank on silence. But when you respond with smarts, proof, and just the right amount of pressure, even a king-size SUV and a fake badge can't outrun karma. If you found this story valuable, if it made you laugh, gave you a little courage, or reminded you why community matters, please share it with a friend who might need it right now. Maybe someone dealing with their own Tamara. And leave a comment below. What part hit home for you? What would you have done? I read every one. And don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe, because next week's story, it'll make this one look like a warm-up. Let's just say forged wills, hidden cameras, and a woman named Lorraine who didn't know her victim had a law degree. You will not want to miss it. What would you like me to dig into next? Do you want more HOA horror stories with poetic justice? Revenge stories with legal twists? Or maybe tales of quiet folks who surprise everyone and flip the script? Drop a comment below and tell me what you want to hear next. Your ideas help shape the next episode, and trust me, I love exposing a good fake authority figure. If your story idea gets picked, I might just turn it into the next viral showdown. So, what should we do next?